Hi, I'm Dr. Marty Schreiber, Chief Medical Officer for Home Modalities at DaVita. And it's my pleasure to really be with Mark Shapiro today. And Dr. Shapiro is the National PD Consultant for DaVita and a medical director of 3 peritoneal dialysis programs in the San Diego area. He is extremely knowledgeable about peritoneal dialysis and has had a real impact on helping us see peritoneal dialysis in a different way as it relates to this topic of practice culture. And Mark talked about practice culture at the physician leadership meeting for DaVita in March of this year, 2018. And I thought it would be very helpful for him to reflect on that practice culture and really to tell us how the practice culture evolved. So Mark, it's great having you here today. I super enjoy chatting with you, both as a colleague, a friend, but somebody who really sees the world maybe a little bit differently than a number of nephrology practices across the United States. And I wonder if you could really share with us how you built a practice culture around matching the right therapy for the right patient at the right time. So.
Right. Thanks, Marty. I think we have to be patient-focused, patient-centric. And I, over the years, have really worked on the concept of customized dialysis therapy for individual patients. I think we have to approach every patient as an individual and do what's best for them. And my partners and I have really reached the conclusion that peritoneal dialysis in many cases is clinically better as an initial therapy for people starting dialysis. And so we have tried to develop a practice culture which facilitates our ability to get people onto peritoneal dialysis right out of the gate. And I think we've been pretty successful at it compared to a lot of other groups.
You know, what fascinates me as I travel around the United States and interact with a number of different practices, I hear this term, I'm the PD champion of the practice. What's the difference between having a PD champion in your practice and having a practice culture? And why do you believe a practice culture is so critical and maybe better than having just a champion?
Right. A lot of groups will have an individual nephrologist be their PD champion, the one that does all their PD. In fact, many groups will have only 1 or 2 nephrologists do all the peritoneal dialysis for the group. And I suppose that offers the advantage of having a subject matter expert taking care of the patients. The problem is that if you're talking about taking care of an entire community, I think that model has limitations. What I've experienced and what I've seen traveling and talking to other groups is by having a physician champion, it's not hard for a medical group to get 10 or 11 or 12% of their collective patients onto peritoneal. But if your goal is to get 35% of your patients on peritoneal, I don't believe that that model works. In fact, the model that really works is to get all the physicians to get on board with this. And so part of the things that our group has done is made an effort to get every physician involved in the process of peritoneal dialysis. And that's really why we've been able to achieve some of the goals that we've achieved so far.
How did you do that? How did you get everybody on board? Because you know, it doesn't seem like everybody comes in with the same mindset.
Right. So it wasn't me. Okay. It was us. It was us. And so really, it requires a group decision. Our group believes in the benefits of peritoneal dialysis, and we believe that if we should have 30 or 40% of our patients on PD, then we had to do the things necessary to get them there. So the first thing we had to do was get a consensus buy-in. We had meetings, we talked, we set common goals. We agreed that this is what we should do. We created metrics that we thought were meaningful, and then we decided that we had to hold ourselves accountable to it. So you have to make a decision about what you want to do. You have to have a way of measuring the metrics of what you're doing, and then you have to have a system of holding each other accountable to this. But the other thing, there's some other things that we did, right? First is that we have had physicians who really weren't that comfortable with peritoneal dialysis. And so it became mandatory that everybody get there. They had to go to meetings, they had to take classes, they had to go to lectures, right? There's plenty of them available, right? DaVita offers them all the time, okay? And so that was the first thing. All of our nephrologists had to get good at this. The second thing that we did was we redistributed our peritoneal dialysis patients. And so every nephrologist in our group was given 2 half-day PD clinics a month. because our feeling was that how can any nephrologist really become confident and comfortable with the therapy unless they're doing it on a regular basis? The idea that a new nephrologist joining your group will somehow build a PD practice from scratch never happens. But by redistributing the patients, suddenly all the doctors on a day-to-day basis were taking care of PD patients. Their comfort level goes, their referral rates grow. So the competency, the metrics, the accountability is really what made the difference for us.
Great. That's great practical advice in my mind. And as I think about the different ways to really allow more patients to proceed with peritoneal dialysis, there are two, I think, paths that increase the ability of patients to start. One is urgent start dialysis, and then the other is conversions. You know, people that may have started dialysis in an in-center unit unplanned, aren't educated as to what their options were, in potentially converting them to believers and feeling confident in doing PD. Could you talk quickly about urgent starts and conversions?
Yeah. Well, yeah, let me talk in a broader sense
Okay.
about the process, right?
All
So
right.
it's great that the nephrologists buy in. It's great that we're going to hold them accountable. It's great that we're going to measure the metrics. But you still have to have processes in place. What are the processes? CKD education. Okay, we make a big deal out of it. We hold each other accountable to making sure we do it. Our office, our medical assistants have gone to Kidney Smart, for example, so they're knowledgeable about these therapies. We have PD First posters in the office to help promote the therapy to patients, right? We do embedded PD catheters, which I think is a really important strategy to get patients upstream onto peritoneal dialysis. That's a process. Urgent start PD. You know, 9 out of the last 20 patients that we started on peritoneal dialysis came through the urgent start process. If we weren't doing urgent start PD, they'd all start off in the hemodialysis clinic with a catheter. Most of them would still be in the hemodialysis clinic today. Statistically speaking, we know that's true. So these are the sort of processes that we put in place. And then the other thing that you mentioned that I think is really critically important is what we call conversions, right? We know that most patients who land in a hemodialysis clinic, well, frankly, they never escape the hemodialysis clinic unless they get a transplant or die. We tried to change that paradigm because we believe that many patients who start in a hemodialysis clinic don't really belong there. That's not really the optimal therapy for them. And so we've gone about educating the employees, the teammates in the clinics, the nurses, the techs, the FAs, the social workers, the dietitians, to help us with our mission of getting every patient onto that form of therapy, which is best for the patient. And by doing that, we've seen quite a few patients convert from in-center hemo to peritoneal.
Right. It's interesting when I talk to physicians, the physicians say, you know, Marty, it's hard for me to convince a patient to choose peritoneal dialysis. And how do you approach that? Because you've demonstrated a growth. So it's not just that you espouse to a goal, you really have walked the talk. I mean, you know, you've done it. But talk to us about the patient.
Right, so that's a really critically important issue. Well, let me say again, nephrologists aren't taught or trained how to do these kinds of things. And we're put into a clinic, we talk to patients, how effective we really are at getting patients to do what we think is best for the patient. There's a huge amount of variability amongst physicians, right? And I could give you an example of a partner of mine who came to me and said, you know, I really want to get new patients on PD. I can't seem to talk any of them into doing it. And I don't think it's because of the patients. I think it was because of the physician's practice style. And we actually went through, honestly sat down and said, what is it that you say? How do you say it? We actually created talking points. And we don't have the time to give those talking points, but the point is, I think physicians need to work on their delivery and their style. If they're not effectively accomplishing the goals that they set, they have to step back and look at the way they're delivering the message. They have to sometimes work on their practice style, their education style, if they're having trouble getting patients to do what they think the patient should do.
And so in your practice, tell us where you started and where you're currently at relative to your ability to help patients feel more comfortable and confident in treating their kidney disease at home.
Right, so there was a day when I was the PD champion in our practice, and we were like other groups. We were at 12 or 15%. And at some point, I think I realized and our group realized that we wanted to perform better than that. We all believed in it, but we weren't accomplishing it. And so it was a matter of getting all the physicians on board. all the physicians became on board, and really we've gradually gotten to the point where I can tell you this calendar year, we've started over 40% of our new patients on PD, which was our practice goal. And right now we have more than 30% of our population on home dialysis. And so we're pretty close to where we want to be. And it's an exciting thing when you actually do what you want to do, when you're actually accomplishing the goals that you want to accomplish. And I think it's just great for the community. I think that it allows us to deliver much better care than we would otherwise.
I would like to thank Dr. Mark Shapiro for really talking to us today about what it means to have a practice culture. And we talk about culture in a number of different venues throughout society, but to have a culture really points individuals in the right direction on an agreed upon goal. So Mark shared with us today how he did it and how successful he was in his own practice. And I really would encourage all of the audience to really take his wisdom, take the practices and the processes that he implemented in his own practice, and really bring them to your own practices. But it starts with practice culture, and having a culture where you see the value of peritoneal dialysis for patients that are starting ESRD therapy. Mark, I can't thank you enough. I mean, you know, this is, to me, you've made me appreciate the value of practice culture. And not only the word, but taught me what it actually means.
You know, Marty, we're dialysis doctors. That's what we are. We better do a good job.
I know, yeah.
Thanks much.
Thank you.